The wind rushed over the hills, like a song no one had written, rushing through the tall grass with a whisper and curling around the chimney tops of the sleepy village of Nibbleton Hollow. High above, the sky was not just blue, it shimmered with soft threads of gold and pearl, as if someone had stitched it with a giant needle. Yet something strange was happening that day. The clouds were missing. Not a single puff of white floated in the sky. No woolly tufts to shade the flowers. No silver shadows gliding across the cobblestones. The villagers paused their chores, glancing upward with puzzled eyes. Even the birds circled slowly, confused by the wide emptiness above. Far past the edge of the village, past the bend in the river and the thicket of singing birch trees, a girl with shoes full of dust and a satchel full of string walked with her face turned to the heavens. Her name was Elia, and she noticed things most others didn't. She saw the way the sun blinked when it was lonely. She saw how dew gathered only on the flowers that had cried in the night. And today, she saw what everyone else had missed, a tiny glimmer, like a lantern swaying gently at the sky's farthest edge. Elia crouched on the mossy path and listened. There it was again, a soft clink, like glass tapping glass, then a whoosh, a rustle, a whisper. Something or someone was up there, collecting the clouds. She didn't know how she knew, but the moment the sky blinked again, slower this time, almost sad, she tied her laces tight and followed the sound uphill, toward the place where clouds used to sleep. Elia's feet carried her past the last crooked fence and onto the wild paths where no villager wandered after supper. The ground here was soft with pine needles and patches of blue mushrooms that hummed when stepped on. Birds flew low, watching her with tilted heads, and the breeze tugged at her satchel as if urging her forward. The lantern light above grew brighter as she climbed. It wasn't a star, Elia was sure of that now. It moved too smoothly, dipping behind treetops and reappearing near the crags where misty fog often pooled. The sky, though still empty of clouds, seemed to pulse with gentle longing. Then, through the thinning trees, she saw it. A tall man in a coat, stitched with feathers, stood on the edge of a cliff, balancing on a flat rock shaped like a ship. He held a long net woven from starlight and spider silk, and in that net, nestled like soft treasure, were clouds, real clouds curled and glistening like sleepy sheep. He moved with grace, dipping the net skyward, then flicking his wrist. A low hum filled the air, and another puff of cloud slipped down from the sky like it had been summoned. The man gently gathered it, folded it into a tiny jar with a silver lid, and tucked it into a wooden case filled with more jars, each glowing faintly from within. Elia ducked behind a rock, breath caught in her chest. But the man didn't look down. He stared at the horizon, murmuring words the wind carried away. Then, with a sigh that ruffled the leaves below, he turned and walked into the cliffside. Not through a door, through the stone itself. The cliff shimmered where he vanished, like water settling after a skipped pebble. And just like that, he was gone. Elia stood in silence for a long while, heart thudding like a distant drum. The sky blinked again twice this time, as if nudging her. She stepped forward, touched the stone where he disappeared, and felt a sudden pull, like a thread tugging her sleeve. Without thinking, she stepped through. The world on the other side was not a room, but a stairwell round and spiraling, with walls carved from cloudstone that shifted gently like foam. The air was cool and smelled of rain before it falls. With wide eyes and careful feet, Elia descended. Lanterns floated midair, glowing soft yellow, lighting the steps as she passed. Far below, she heard the faint whirring of gears, the splash of water, and the musical clinks of jars being set on shelves. Then a voice clear and tired rose up the stairwell. Who stepped so lightly down a staircase made of mist? Elia froze. She hadn't meant to be found. But the voice didn't sound angry, just curious. And maybe a little lonely. She reached the bottom step and found herself in a round room full of hanging maps. The maps shifted, showing clouds drifting across different skies. Tall shelves circled the room, filled with labeled jars, morning mists of Larkhill, crumpled thunder from Dragon's Spine, dream puffs, collected during eclipse. In the center stood the cloud collector. He looked no older than a middle-aged man, though his coat sparkled with time. His eyes were pale blue, almost white, and his hair fell in gentle waves, like the sky's own memory. He did not ask her name. Instead, he looked at her boots, at her satchel, and then at her hands, which he had not noticed were lightly glowing. He said, or rather, it felt like he said, though his lips barely moved. You've seen the sky cry, haven't you? Elia nodded slowly. Her throat was dry. She thought of all the times she'd noticed a lonely cloud or a weeping flower and said nothing. Maybe the sky had been trying to tell her something all along. The cloud collector walked to a wide table where an empty jar waited beside a journal with no writing in it. He gestured to the chair beside it. Without words, Elia understood. He needed help. As she sat, the lanterns dimmed, and the ceiling above shimmered to reveal the real sky distant and quiet, missing its drifting wonders. The collector moved slowly now, shoulders heavy, as he explained not in speech but in feeling how clouds weren't just fluff in the sky. They held memories, emotions, stories. Without them, the sky became still. The weather forgot its song. Even dreams became dull. There was a balance, he explained, between gathering and releasing. He only collected clouds when they were ready, when they whispered their stories to the wind. But lately, the clouds were vanishing on their own, fading before they could even be caught. Something was wrong. Something was stealing the clouds. Elia's heart tightened. She had seen the missing sky, the birds flying lost, the sun blinking lonely. She wanted to help. She needed to. The collector raised his hand, and from a drawer of moon-polished wood, he took a small compass, but its needle pointed not north or south, it pointed to wherever the next whispering cloud awaited. He placed it gently into Elia's hand. The glow from her fingers brightened. An apprentice, he thought. Yes, that is what she would become. The next few days blurred like dreams stitched to morning. Elia learned how to listen to the sky, not with ears, but with stillness. She was shown how to cradle a cloud in her palms, how to hum the lullaby that soothed storm wisps, and how to bottle a sunset fog without spilling its color. They traveled together through invisible doors in the wind. Sometimes they floated above oceans where sea spray clouds giggled in spirals. Other times, they crouched on rooftops as nighttime clouds drifted through moonlight, whispering lullabies meant only for those who watched. But always, just as they reached for the next cloud, it would vanish, not fade, not drift away, vanish, as though eaten by silence. Then came the night they followed the compass to the hollow's edge. They arrived before dawn. The wind was too still. The stars blinked in warning, and when Elia reached for a puff of cloud curling above the brook, it hissed and turned to ash in her hand. The collector paled. That should not happen. From the darkness beyond the trees came a hum, not musical this time, but low and growling. A shape, like a shadow coiled tight, emerged from between two rocks. It had no face, but Elia felt its gaze, cold and endless. It was not made of sky, it was not of the wind. It was what had been stealing the clouds. The collector stood tall, his coat rippling like wings. But Elia saw his hand tremble. Whatever this thing was, it did not fear him. It slithered closer, leaving patches of blackened earth behind. The collector whispered something into the wind, though it sounded more like memory than voice, and pushed Elia behind him. The shadow lunged, but before it could strike, the compass in Elia's pocket glowed hot. She pulled it free, and it burst with light, a single beam pointing not to the sky, but into her own chest, to her heart, to the part of her that had once cried for lonely flowers and blinked back tears when the sun seemed tired. The shadow hissed, reeling, then vanished into the fog it had poisoned. The collector turned slowly, eyes wide. The compass hadn't chosen her just to find clouds. It had chosen her to protect them. A sharp chill cut through the trees. As the last hiss of the shadow faded into the darkness, Elia stood frozen, the glowing compass still clutched in her hand. Her breath rose in front of her like smoke, thin and shaking. The collector did not speak. His eyes, always calm, always knowing, were now filled with something Elia had never seen in them before. Fear. The earth beneath them pulsed faintly, like the last heartbeat of something great and ancient. All around, the grass had wilted. The air had thickened, heavy with something that did not belong in the sky or on the land. The compass dimmed. Slowly, the light pulled inward, back into Elia's chest, leaving a faint warmth where it had burned moments ago. She took a step forward, then another, and knelt by the blackened edge of the brook. The water no longer flowed. It sat still, flat like a mirror, but not a true one. In its reflection, there were no stars. No sky. Only the dark, creeping shape that had tried to steal the cloud. The collector's voice came low and steady at last, not with words, but with memory again. Long ago, before even the oldest winds could remember, there had been another. Not a collector, a devourer. A creature born of emptiness, feeding on the dreams clouds carried. It had been sealed beneath the earth, forgotten by the sky itself, but something had stirred it. Elia's eyes widened. The missing clouds. The sadness in the sun. The silence in the wind. The devourer was rising again. And she had woken it. She stumbled back, heart thudding like thunder trapped in her chest. She hadn't meant to. She had only followed the light, only tried to help, but the compass had led her here. Was it a mistake? The collector stepped beside her. His coat whispered with wind, but his hands were gentle as he helped her to her feet. No mistake, the air around him seemed to say. A warning, a call, a choice. Far above, the clouds had started to return. Thin wisps, cautious and pale, curling at the edges of the dawn. But they did not descend. They hovered, waiting. Elia turned to the compass again, but it was silent now. Whatever magic it had used to reveal the devourer had drained it. She looked up at the collector. What now? He turned, and began to walk not through a door, but across the forest floor, deeper into the trees. The path was not a path. It wound in strange loops, following no trail. But Elia followed, breath steadying with every step. Soon, they reached a clearing. In the center stood an arch of stone, ancient and humming softly. Symbols shimmered across its surface, dancing like raindrops. A pool of water shimmered beneath it, glowing faintly with soft blue light. This, the collector shared through thought and image, was the dream gate, where clouds were born, where memories were sifted and shaped into skies. It was the balance, the heart of the sky's dreaming. And now, it was threatened. Elia stepped closer, peering into the water. The devourer's shadow flickered deep within it, twisting just out of reach. If it broke through the gate, it would not only take the clouds, it would erase what the sky remembered, every dream, every laugh, every tear that ever rose into the air to become mist. The collector placed a jar in her hands. It glowed gold, warm and gentle. Inside was a cloud, unlike the others, small, soft, glowing faintly. A memory cloud, born not from the wind, but from kindness. It had been waiting for her. He nodded once. She understood. Only a light born from the heart of someone who remembered what it felt like to care, to listen, to hope only that kind of cloud could seal the gate again. But the devourer would not go quietly. The wind shrieked suddenly, and the trees bent low. The sky above churned. The dark shape returned, rising like smoke, twisting with hunger and silence. It rushed toward the gate, trailing tendrils of shadow. Elia's heart slammed in her chest. She clutched the jar tightly and stepped onto the stone platform. Her knees shook. The shadow reached for her. The gate began to flicker. The collector raised both hands. His coat flared, his eyes glowing white as he summoned the wind, the sky, the forgotten clouds. They came rushing in a storm of color and memory, slamming into the devourer. For a moment, it reeled, but it did not fall. Elia screamed silently, pushing forward. She opened the jar. The golden cloud floated up, glowing brighter than the sun. The devourer shrieked and lunged, trying to smother it, to swallow it whole. Elia stepped between them. The cloud drifted into her hands. It pulsed with warmth. With every beat, it filled her not just with light, but with all the memories she had ever cherished. Her grandmother's song. The first time she saw a snowflake melt on her finger. The hush of the forest when she listened closely. The laughter of friends. The tears of a sad sky. The devourer struck, but it did not reach her. The cloud burst into brilliant light, wrapping Elia in a shield of warmth. The devourer screeched, flailing as the light pierced its core. Then, slowly, surely, it began to fade. Not like smoke, but like a bad dream at sunrise. The shadows peeled back, the sky quieted, the wind returned. Elia collapsed to her knees, the empty jar still warm in her hands. The dream gate shimmered once more, now whole, now safe. The clouds above drifted low, circling gently like birds finding their nest again. The collector knelt beside her, eyes full of quiet pride. He helped her to her feet, and together they watched as the clouds returned, soft, colorful, alive. She had not just protected them, she had reminded them how to dream. The light from the memory cloud slowly dimmed, like a candle reaching the end of its song. The dream gate stood silent and strong, its waters calm once more. The air, which had felt heavy with dread only moments ago, now carried a scent of wildflowers and fresh rain. Elia stood still, breathing deeply, letting the peace settle inside her. The collector walked beside her, his movements slower now, more grounded. His coat no longer shimmered so brightly, and the wind no longer danced at his heels, but his eyes were calm, the color of sky just before morning. He looked at Elia with quiet understanding. She had passed the trial, not by defeating the devourer with power, but with memory, with light that could not be taken. And now, the sky had something it hadn't had in a long time, a protector who understood both silence and song. Around them, clouds returned in gentle swirls. Some floated low to greet the forest, others stretched across the heavens like sleepy blankets. Birds soared again, their paths guided by drifting shadows. The sun blinked gently, not in sadness now, but in soft relief. The sky was healing. Elia and the collector began the walk back through the forest. The path, once tangled and unsure, now felt warm beneath their feet, like it recognized them. Trees shifted to make way. Flowers turned their faces. Even the brook, which had once stilled in fear, now trickled gently, reflecting bits of the returned sky in its ripples. Back at the mist-carved stairwell, Elia paused. The lanterns that had once floated now circled her gently, blinking in slow rhythms. As she stepped inside, the walls pulsed with color-soft pinks and blues and greens. The cloudstone remembered her now. It had accepted her. They descended slowly, past the jars on shelves, past the maps that now showed clouds dancing once more. The round room welcomed them with a hush, like a library just before a story begins. The collector walked to the great table in the center and opened the once empty journal. Words now filled its pages, curved, golden writing that shimmered as it moved. It told a tale of a girl who followed a blinking sky, who heard the clouds cry, and who answered with kindness. He turned the book so Elia could see, then stepped back. A single lantern floated down and settled above her head. The light brightened, then flickered softly, as if nodding. In the quiet that followed, Elia felt a change. It wasn't loud or sudden, it was gentle, like the first breath after a storm. She was no longer just an apprentice. She was a cloud keeper. Not a title to wear with pride, but a promise. To listen when the sky grew quiet, to gather memories when the world forgot them, to protect the balance between rain and light, between dreams and shadows. The collector placed the starlight net in her hands. She felt the hum of it, soft, steady, patient. He would still guide her, but his work was changing. The sky had chosen someone new to watch over its gentle treasures. Days passed like wind over water. Elia traveled across high cliffs and deep valleys, her satchel filled with empty jars and silver thread. She mended broken clouds. She whispered to stubborn storms. She released memory clouds when the world needed to remember love, laughter, or hope. Children in the village below began to see shapes in the sky again, dragons made of mist, ships made of thunder, castles floating on pillow-soft fog. They didn't know why the skies had changed, but they looked up more often, eyes full of wonder. One evening, as the sun slipped low and painted the clouds gold, Elia sat at the edge of the same cliff, where she'd once seen the cloud collector netting wisps from the sky. Now, it was her turn. She watched the wind carry a small, glowing cloud her way. It shimmered with soft blue light, gentle and full of laughter. Elia reached out with careful hands, humming a lullaby only the clouds understood. The cloud curled in her palms, purring like a kitten, and slipped into her jar with a happy sigh. She turned to go, but something made her stop. A soft rustle, a whisper, and a flicker of movement near the trees. There, standing shyly between the shadows, was a boy. He wore boots too big, and a coat patched with leaves. His eyes were wide, full of sky. And his hands, Elia could see the faintest glow at his fingertips. He watched the cloud in her jar with wonder. Then, slowly, looked up at the sky. He had seen it too. The blinking sun, the crying flowers, the missing clouds. Elia smiled, soft and knowing. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a spare compass, its face quiet, its needle asleep. She held it out. The boy stepped forward, eyes never leaving hers. He took the compass. It flickered. And for the first time, Elia saw her own story begin again. The sky, ever so gently, blinked in delight. The world would always need someone to listen, someone to remember, someone to catch dreams before they disappeared. And now, the cloud collector's apprentice had become a keeper of those dreams, ready to teach, ready to protect, ready to share the light. The clouds above drifted slowly, peaceful and proud, their stories safe in hands that truly understood them. And so, the skies sang again,